Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our wonderful podcast. We're here to talk about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 6. And I am here with my two lovely cousins, Evalina and Claudia. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
And we're really excited to talk about this one. A lot of big things happening, a big time jump, a lot of new actors, a lot of characters, a lot of events, a lot of deaths, a lot of births, a lot of stuff. So
A lot of stuff.
um, how, just before we get into it, how did you feel overall, Evelina? You were saying before we started that you were a little bit disjarred by the new actors.
Well, up until this most recent episode, I have loved it. I feel like every week has just gotten better and better. And then when I read things online about like people saying things that, aren't in favor of the show, I just don't agree with it at all. Like I'm a huge fan of the show, but I do have to say like with the new cast switchover, it's like hard to like get behind the same people that I was rooting for.
Yeah.
Like with Rhaenyra, I was like obsessed with her, love her. She's the rightful heir. And now I just feel like a little bit bored with her. And I think, I don't know if it's just the cast thing change or maybe the story, but I didn't really see how Harwin fell into place. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Like, who was Harwin before this episode? Like, we saw him briefly, I think, in the wedding episode. And then if we did see him before that, he wasn't like memorable to me. So I don't really know how he fits in. And like, where was the attraction there? Where was like, he's the father of like her children now, but I didn't see any chemistry.
Okay,
Oh my God, then you missed it.
I did?
You literally missed it. Okay, I also think I'm really biased because Ryan explains things to me. And so I know, like, I feel like, Ryan, I feel like you told me how she would end up with him, right? So I kind of knew that. And then, so I was looking out for it. And then so I knew, I saw the buildup. I do wish there was more chemistry between them. I wish they would have at least like kissed before he left. Like something, give us something. But I kind of knew it had happened or it was going to happen.
so yes, I think when I told you that it was just you, I think Claudia, because you
Yeah, I think
texted and you said you were like gonna rewatch that episode right away, and I said, oh, since you're rewatching it, make sure to watch out for this scene, which
yeah.
is Evelina. If you remember the scene, was it the second episode? It's the second or the
Second
third
or
episode,
third, yeah, something like that.
where she killed the boar, she killed the pig, the wild boar,
Yes,
and then
yes.
she came back to the camp all bloody, and everybody in the camp was looking at her like she was nuts,
Mm-hmm.
except for Harwin. And it was like really quick, but if you saw his face, him and his brother just kind of looked at her like, oh gosh, what is she, she looks nuts. But then Harwin like had this big shit eating grin on his face. He was like, oh, she looks awesome. Like,
Yeah.
so he already had like these thirsty eyes for her or whatever. He was
Mm.
already looking at her like that. And then
I
in
definitely missed that then.
in the last episode at the wedding, or the pre-party for the wedding, um, he was the one that rescued her, like got her out of there.
I saw that.
Yeah, so because his dad was like, "You better go in there," because the Kingsguard couldn't get a handle on the situation, so he kind of went
Hmm.
in. Um, so and yeah, it's kind of
And there was that episode in the little scene in the alleyway when she's
yes,
running with Damon through like remember the strip club
Oh, and then
house?
that's him that she
Yeah,
runs into.
but he has
he's
a
like,
big helmet on, so you can't see his face, and
but
it's
she says
dark.
Mm.
you're Harwin. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then he's like princess, and then he like lets her go.
Yeah, he lets her go.
But
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
I do agree that I do wish we saw a little bit more, something more
Yeah.
obvious and like
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because then even in this most recent episode, like I just knew I had also read online that she was going to end up with Harwin and he was like going to be the rumored father of the children. But then even in this episode, like seeing them together, I don't know, there wasn't like a lot of romance there, but I think it's also cuz like they have to be, hush hush and keep everything under wraps. But it would have been nice to see like a romantic, sentimental moment between the two of them before,
Yeah.
because he died, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It the whole time they had to have their masks up, like they couldn't be themselves with each other, right? Because even
Oh, I
when they
see.
were having, even when it was just them in the room with like their kids, like they still have to lie in front of the younger kid.
Oh, right.
But the older
Okay.
kid, he kind of caught on at the end and he asked her, right? But like
Yeah.
they still have to like, because like you can't give a secret like that to a little kid. They're just gonna blurt it out, right? Like,
Yeah.
and even though
Yeah.
it's like an open secret, everybody knows. You can't just have the kid going around blabbing stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. It would have been nice to see a scene at least setting them up more, or like even in like the last episode after he rescues her, like maybe just have her be appreciative or
Hmm.
something. In that moment, she was like, put me down, get your hands off me, put me down." But
Mhm.
like maybe after that, or like I don't know.
Hmm.
It's kind of like you live and die by the time jump. You make the decision to make a time jump, well, then you're gonna have to cut some stuff out, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
with that being said, let's get right into like this first scene here with oh gosh, this birthing scene. Man, I I watched this scene, and you guys know my setup, right? I have like the surround sound speakers right next to my ear.
Oh,
So like the
yeah.
sound of the birthing stuff is like, oh god, it was like
Yeah.
cringing. Um,
I I heard it and I was like, "Oh my God, is that coming from the TV?" And then in the subtitles, it's like squelching noises, and I was like, "Ugh!" Like yeah, I think it's interesting to see, like, because this is, I mean, how many childbirths have we seen? This is like what, number two? Like pretty in depth,
yeah,
pretty showy.
yeah,
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 so I think it's interesting, like with, say, Game of Thrones, right? We always see like the battle with, men going at it and stuff. And then in the beginning, like when the mom of Rhaenyra says, "Oh, this is our battlefield," it's kind of interesting to see, like, okay, this is like the fight that the women are doing, like their part. Um, yeah. Claudia,
yeah.
anything?
Does this scene help you with your fear of having children, Claudia?
No. I mean, yeah.
It
It
made it worse for me.
literally. And then when they like snipped the umbilical cord, I think Marcel and I were eating, and I literally had to put the pot sticker down. I was like, this is
Put the
disgusting.
pot sticker down.
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay, so props to the sound engineer for that scene. Props
Yes.
to the director and how
Props.
they did it. Props to Rhaenyra for getting up and going to see the queen herself right after giving birth. Oh, I see
yeah.
Kalala in the back. Hi, Kalala.
Gila has a little bed in the corner. Hi, Gita.
Um, and
Yeah, in the background of the like one of the scenes you saw like the trail of blood from her walking, and I was like, "Oh my God, she's bleeding this whole time,"
yeah,
which makes
Yeah.
sense because she just gave birth. But still,
I
Yeah.
remember when she got up, and I turned to my mom and I was like, "Can you really do that? Like 2 minutes after giving birth, just get up?" And my mom was like, she like shrugged. Like,
Yeah. I thought probably not, but the scene really showed, one, like how strong Rhaenyra is, and then two, really showed us like how cruel Alicent is.
I will
Because
say that Allison, to be clear though, Allison just requested to see the baby. She didn't expect Rhaenyra to come herself.
oh, I
That was
see.
Rhaenyra's. Rhaenyra told the servant lady like, "I'll take her myself." I think
yeah.
that the
Oh.
servant lady was expecting to take the baby, you know.
Mm,
But
don't trust her alone with the baby.
yeah,
Mm.
I wouldn't either if I were Rhaenyra. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could have sent the husband. You didn't have to like do it
Hmm.
yourself. So, um,
Yeah.
and interestingly enough, this scene was also cool because it was all one shot, no cut. Like the camera
Mm.
followed them the whole way. And I think on the inside the episode, the director said like that was a choice they made because the way they built the sets with they had like this giant set for King's Landing. You know, like normally on a TV show, if they have like a set, it's like just for one room, and then
Hmm.
next to it it's like another set for a different room somewhere else. Well, no, this one they
Right.
actually built the whole like interior of the castle.
Dang.
So
Wow.
He's like,
Didn't
well, we
know
built
that.
this whole darn thing. We might as well have at least one scene where we actually utilize
Do
a
the
big
one
chunk
shot.
of it, in a one shot. And I think that was a pretty good choice they made, because it accentuates like Rhaenyra's toughness
Hmm.
as well.
And just
So
like, yeah, how long that journey was. Like going up the stairs, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, she must be in so much pain. Like each one of those steps was probably excruciating.
yeah, yeah. And I remember the husband, her husband was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" It's like, "What do you mean, what's wrong? She needs a second. Just hold her up, dude. Like,
Yeah.
just hold." He's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?"
Yeah.
Okay, so um, the scene after that was the dragon taming scene. Who
Oh my gosh.
um, I think, Claudia, you asked me last week who my favorite character on the show is, and right now it's gotta be this master dragon keeper dude, the old dude. I think
Yeah.
he is so cool, man. With like, he's speaking like Valyrian. He's like blah 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 blah. He's like teaching them everything, and it's like, oh, this guy's awesome. He's like the old wise kung fu master in those old kung fu movies or
Yeah.
something.
Like he knows everything about the dragons. He has to teach them how to use it.
Yeah. So I think actually they might play a semi-important role at the very end of the series. I'm not going to spoil things, but like, I think we will see more of them later. Is all I'll say.
Nice.
Um,
I'm
so yeah, so
excited.
here was like Jaceris. He's trying to tame the dragon Vermax. And you get our first look at the two the other princes, Aegon and Aemond,
Mhm.
and Jason, his brother Luke. So, what did you guys think of this scene, and what did you think of the kids?
I wish Rhaenyra's kids looked a little bit more badass. They looked like little pansies trying to tame this dragon. I was like, say it with some authority. Come on. Like that was just my opinion when I saw Rhaenyra's kids. And then when I saw Allison's kids, I was like, I don't think they're any better. They just have white hair. Because they kind of look
Yeah.
weird. Especially the oldest one. Something's wrong with the oldest one. I don't know if I like how
I
he looks.
I called him when I saw him. I was like, I almost thought about texting you guys. I was like, this is discount Timothy Chalamet. Like, he just looks like an albino, unhealthy version of Timothy Chalamet.
Timothy Chalamet. Um, I yeah. For me, honestly, it was hard to recognize like, yeah, I guess like which kids was which. Because I knew like the blonde kids was Allison's kids, but then I'm like, okay, well, who's older here? Like, it didn't really. I don't know. I felt confused more by the kids than actually watching the scene. And then I thought the blonde kid was the Finn Wolford kid from Stranger Things,
Oh,
the
he does look
discount
like him
Timothy
too.
Chalamet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, no, it can't be him. But yeah, it's actually some other guy. I don't know. I guess I don't really know how I feel about that scene. But I think it was cool to see them like grow up learning about their dragons. Cause then it's like, okay, it's not like innate from birth that they control the dragons. Like they need to train on it. And then how the little boy gets like bullied because he doesn't have a dragon.
Yeah, wait,
Yeah.
so why
I
is
didn't
that?
know that they all didn't get the eggs. I thought they all got eggs.
I think
Well,
just some of them don't hatch or something. Like it depends on when they hatch.
yeah. I think later on, Lena, when she talks to her daughter, she's like, yeah, like half of them don't hatch. Um,
Mm.
and I thought this was going to be something that they explained more in the show, because in the Game of Thrones main books and in this book, it's kind of like iffy. I'm like, they don't really explain like how they hatch. They just say like, oh, Targaryen babies are sometimes given, most of the time they're given an egg in their cradle, and then but there are many cases of Targaryens not having bonded dragons until they get until they get to adulthood. So in some cases, it was by choice. Like one of the Targaryen princes, he's like, he wanted a specific dragon, but it was already bonded to his dad. So he's
Mm.
like, he waited for his dad to die before
So I could have the
so he could
dragon.
have that dragon because he wanted that specific one. In other cases, it probably just like how it's playing out in the show, like, oh, he just couldn't tame one, or the chemistry wasn't right, or whatever.
Mm.
So
So then do those dragons like that don't get tamed by like the cradle that they're, placed in, can they be bonded with like any other Targaryen, or they just kind of like fly off into the sunset and we never hear about them again? Also,
and
my other question was like, where did these eggs come from?
The
so
other dragons.
yeah, okay. So the first answer the first question: if the dragon is born under their control, then they will most likely just keep it in the dragon pit, which like they're doing right now for Vermax,
Mm-hmm.
and the other few dragons that are down there, but we don't really get to see them. Um, for there are other dragons that are like what we would call like wild or feral that aren't under their control. Um, Vagar, the old one that we see in this the big one, she was not under their control because she was too big for the dragon pit. Although she had riders in the past,
Okay.
but she was kind of off on her own because they couldn't put her in the dragon pit, and you can't control a dragon like without having some sort of thing. So she was left off her own. And in the books, there are like
Oh,
two
so
or
she's basically an off-leash dog.
yeah. In the books, there are like two or three wild dragons, feral dragons that they try to tame, but they are unsuccessful. Um,
Mm.
and then your other question was, what was your other question, Evelina?
Where do the eggs come from? Like, are the dragons just like laying eggs, or like, I don't know? Because one of the kids is like, "Oh, I chose an egg," and I'm like, "From where?"
That one seems a little bit random too. It's just like they lay them whenever. Um,
Mm,
it is known that dragons do sometimes tend to change their sex sometimes. So a male could turn into a female and hatch eggs.
I see.
They
That's
said that, but I
cool.
can't think of like a specific example of when that happened. That's just something they have said before. So, but
Okay.
as we see in the episode later, like Rhaenyra said, like if this dragon lays eggs, you can have one, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not something that it's not as something as easy as like breeding horses or something, right?
Right.
It's kind of up to luck of the draw, I think.
Mm.
Um, okay, so then we had a scene with Allison talking to her kids, the daughter and the second son, the son that was getting bullied, Amon. Um, this scene was like pretty short, but I thought it was really interesting with the daughter. She seemed a little bit nerdy, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't know what the word is. Just a little bit strange.
I read something that she might be a dragon dreamer or something like that. Because I was trying to understand her analogy with the centipede or millipede that was in her hand about the rings and how each one has a leg, but the last one doesn't, and it loses an eye, all that. And then someone said that it loses an eye is an ode to.
Yeah, she'll say when Allison was talking to Amon and he said she said you'll find a dragon eventually. Then Helena said he'll have to close an eye. Um,
Uh,
so that's foreshadowing for probably something in the next episode, if not
mm.
the next two episodes. So yeah, she might be one of those dragon dreamers that we hear about in the Targaryen family. It'll be interesting. I just thought she was very peculiar and a little bit off. So
But she is really pretty. What's her name? Like Helena, you said?
Helena, yeah, I don't know the
Helena.
actress's name, but that's her name in the show.
Yeah, I think she looks great. Love her.
Helena's looking it up. Yeah, I thought she looked a lot like Rhaenyra when she was young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why I feel like Allison doesn't like her because it reminds her too much of Rhaenyra.
um, and then we got this scene with Alicent and Aegon.
Yeah, which what the heck was up with the beginning of that scene? Why was that necessary?
Oh yeah, I was like, oh, interesting.
Well, this is just like a warning for you girls. If you get married and you have kids and you have like teenage sons, to just always knock before you barge into a room like that.
Before we enter.
Before you enter. The first thing I noticed about that scene was when he was standing in the window. I'm like, oh, that's the same window that Tommen jumped out of.
I was thinking that. I was like, wait, have we seen this window before? Is that any kind of foreshadowing to his end?
No, I think it was just like trying to show consistency between the two shows.
Right.
And
okay.
Maybe he's not to show that Tommen wasn't the first person to stand on that windowsill. Although, I mean, when Tommen did it, it was a lot more morbid and a lot more sad, like than what Aegon was doing. So,
right.
But okay, once you get past that scene and she just barges in on him and she doesn't even care what he's doing, and she's trying to get him to realize what is at stake here, and he's just kind of like, well, why can't Rhaenyra just be the queen, and then her son will be king, like after that. That's fine, that's fine.
Like, I'm cool with that.
I'm cool.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Alicent's reaction to that?
I don't know what her issue is. I'm just like, girl, give it up. Let it go. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
why
think,
she wants her kids to have like such a claim to the throne.
I think it's like her dad. I feel like her dad was always like feeding ideas in her head. Like he was the one that was like, oh, go comfort the king, right? And then like when he leaves, he's like, he needs to prepare Aegon to rule. And like at the time, she's like really young there, and the baby's like just born. Aegon's like, I don't know if he was just born, but he was still pretty young. So I think like she's just kind of obsessed over the directions like her dad gave her. Like, oh my gosh, my children's lives are like, they basically, Rhaenyra could just kill them, So she's like trying to protect them, and then in protecting them, she's just like, my son needs to rule.
Wait, also, did we skip over the part of Sir Kristen calling her a see you next Tuesday? Were we going to get to that at all? Because I was shocked that he said that. I was like, excuse me? In front of the queen? Like, I know the queen hates her too, but I'm like, bro, have some professionalism, please.
So, yeah.
Sorry to change the subject.
No, that's okay. I'm surprised he has gotten so darn salty over the last 10 years. Like, he went from like this knight who's like trying to be really honorable, and he's like into Kingsguard, and he's like all idealistic, and then it's like totally shattered, and he's like done a total 180. Like, I get that he would support Alicent over Rhaenyra, but just the fact that he's just so salty. Like,
yeah,
he's like, you could support Alicent without being such a jerk, I mean, he called Rhaenyra see you next Tuesday, but he was kind of acting like Kristen Cole to see you next Tuesday. Like,
yeah.
It made him real unattractive to me real quick.
Yeah. I'm not for Kristen Cole.
Yeah, he's getting pretty toxic, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally agree there. Yeah, I can't remember exactly where in the show the episode that happened. But
I thought it was like after she was leaving the son's room, because she's like walking down like a corridor, like a hallway thing. So I thought maybe what you're referring to like happens really soon after this, or maybe on her way to his room. That's when they have their little chat.
Maybe,
but it's in there somewhere.
It's in there.
Yeah,
I think we did skip over it. I will say, back to what we were talking about, Alicent and Aegon, like, she's coming from like a very real place, like a very realistic place, in terms of like, if you think of real history and like the real court politics and intrigue, like, if you take, especially in like the really toxic empires and kingdoms in history, like, if you take the throne, you have to eliminate any threat to your position. And like, I know in like the Chinese courts and the Ottoman courts, like, it was like a total free for all. If like the emperor died, like the sons would kill all their brothers, you know, like to be the only one left. So some of the Western European monarchies were the same way. So it's like, so if Rhaenyra does come into power now, even if she and Aegon were like the best brother and sister relationship in the world, there will always be like those slithering, conniving politicians or lords that like want to not see Rhaenyra on the throne, so they would back Aegon and start a rebellion or a civil war. So even if they had like the best relationship, and even if Rhaenyra were a man too, there's in the Game of Thrones series, like Joffrey had a little brother, and the Tyrell family like murdered Joffrey so they could put Tommen on because they didn't like Joffrey. So it's like, oh, we just murder him to take, you know, to give the brother a spot, you know. So it really is like pieces on a board, and if you know, if people don't like Rhaenyra, there are other pieces you can move into place to take her spot, you know. So and now that Rhaenyra has her own kids, this goes into play, like why it's so important that her kids are not her husbands, because if you're like one of those lords and you live in this patriarchal, misogynic society, you're like, I don't want to support a woman. And then it's like, oh, I really don't want to support a woman who doesn't even have legitimate kids. She has all these kids from her man mistress, you know. So
her manstress.
Her manstress, yeah. So it's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I think Alicent is like trying to get Aegon to understand that he's in danger. Like once the king dies, like people are in danger. Your life is at stake. And he's just like this teenage boy. It's like, well, you know, I was having fun. You know, it was funny. Blah blah blah. So. But
yeah.
Anyway, history lessons aside, we also covered this time with Daemon, Prince Daemon with his new family in Pentos, and I really liked that they introduced us with like the dragon flying scene, him and his wife together. What did you guys think about that? Did you like the Vhagar, the new big dragon?
Yeah,
I liked it.
That was really cool.
Yeah, I think it was good to see Daemon with his wife. What's her name? Lena. Yeah, because I think it so far, like with Daemon, well, I don't know, maybe that's not true. But I feel like it felt like he really loved her. You know, he had these kids with her. They're, you know, out in Pentos. Seems like they had a good life there, or they have a good life there. So to show him like with an actual healthy relationship with a woman was different this episode. And yeah, I did like to see him with her. Yeah, the dragons was just like kind of playful part of their relationship. So it's like, oh, you know, we get to see, you know, a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we've seen him in the whole show like have a little bit of peace. And it's interesting because she was not happy, but he was kind of content with where they were and what they were doing. And I think she talked to him twice, like, hey, we like, you know, we're the blood of the dragon. We should not be here. Like, we should go home. And he kind of just brushes her off, but it was interesting, that he seemed a little bit happy here. And I get that she probably didn't know him in like his badder years, you know?
Yeah.
And it's probably a combination of them being away from the court and away from the country, and also like him being married to her. She's probably tempered him a little bit, not a lot, but he's still like the same person.
Yeah.
And I kind of And I really liked his wife's character, this actress, and then it's just like,
I
oh,
know.
it was
I
so
know,
quick.
yeah. I wanted
But
to
I
see
was
more of
crying.
her.
I was crying when she did what she did. Like, it was so sad.
Yeah. I have questions about that scene, but we can wait to get there since we have a lot of the episode to get through.
Okay. The fighting scene in the courtyard was next, and I didn't expect this to be so intense. I thought it was going to be a little bit of fun swordplay, but
Same.
they never go. They always go hard in this show. They never do anything half-assed.
Yeah.
I liked in the beginning, like Grandpa Viserys. He's like sitting up there watching all of them, and he was like telling the hand. He was like, "Oh, this is so great, isn't it? Like my sons and Rhaenyra's sons all getting along. This is great, isn't it? Isn't it, Lionel?" And Lionel's just like, yeah, yes, Your Grace." Like he's like, "They're not getting along. What are you talking about?"
Yeah. I thought this scene was like very reminiscent of, I think, like season 1 of Game of Thrones, like early on when Ned Stark is like watching from above the little ones. Of course, I can't remember their names now.
Yeah.
But the little ones, like, kind of practicing in the yard. And then Arya hits the bow, right? The arrow right in the target. So I was like, oh, this kind of feels like that. But yeah, like a proud moment for Viserys, and then it all just kind of,
all just kind of.
Guess there's trouble in paradise.
And this goes again to what we were saying about Kristen Cole becoming just like this nasty person, right? He just he's like first of all he pitted Aegon against Jace, and there's like not only is there a huge size and age difference, but there's also a big skill difference. So it was, and he wasn't teaching him how to be chivalrous, which as a knight of the Kingsguard you should be doing, but he's like purposefully like beat him up, like use your feet,
brutality.
And like I think the behind the scenes they were saying like he was doing that on purpose to try to get Harwin to react. I was like, okay, but you're teaching these kids really bad lessons in the process. And so it just kind of like, well, he has like no honor left at all, he's just like this sniveling mean bully now.
Yeah. I also see like Kristen Cole as kind of like a hypocrite because, like you said, like he was all about honor and stuff, and then he was like ready to invite Rhaenyra to like run away and eat oranges. But then, now he's like so bitter towards her, and then that is like trickling down into the kids. So I forgot the point that I wanted to make about him being a hypocrite. But anyways, I also wanted to make a comment on how Viserys is like in the beginning. He's like, "Oh, like this is so great with the kids in the yard," but it like really goes to show how he's like choosing to turn a blind eye to a lot of things, and that's why like he doesn't really make a very good king. Like he doesn't really act. I feel like he mostly reacts. It's not very,
Yeah. And this goes into the next scene where in the small council meeting, he's not taking the initiative in the scene. He's not leading the meeting at all. He's like, at least in the first couple episodes, he was like making an effort to make decisions and stuff. But like in this one, it's like he's just letting the women just like
hash it out.
Yeah, hash it out. And okay, I must be clear here. I'm not trying to be sexist or misogynistic, but like you can let women voice their opinions, especially in a meeting like this. It's just that he's the king. He needs to like to try to temper the infighting. The infighting on the council. You need to take the lead there and try to temper that. But at the same time, the situation has just kind of gotten to a point where it's like you should have done something a lot sooner, because now it's at this point where it's about to bubble over
first.
But I wanted to talk about the proposal that Rhaenyra gave to Alicent. She said she proposed to marry her son to Alicent's daughter, and then also give them an egg of their choice if her dragon laid some eggs. And I thought this was like a very, very good proposal that like Alicent couldn't even say no to. Like, you'd have to come up with a really good excuse. Mm-hmm. What did you guys think of this proposal?
I thought it was a great idea. I was like, oh, that's actually reasonable, I think.
Yeah, but I feel like we always get kind of tricked, like in the last episode when the kind of manstress of whatever Rhaenyra's husband's name is proposed to Kristen Cole, like, you know, we can all live in harmony and like have our dine how we see fit, right? I was like, yeah, that would work out perfectly. You guys can have your sides, and then to the, you know, kingdom, you're something else. But I think like those are very short lived. So I think like when I was like, oh yeah, what a great idea, like Rhaenyra's here, you know, kind of offering like a little peace offering, like let's show our families really unite, you know, and like, you know, we're strong together as one. I was like, man, this is gonna be short lived, because that's a real juicy offer, but it's gonna go rotten.
And she never got to respond because all she did was just say, like, point to Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra was having some lactation challenges.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh no, and then she just she got all embarrassed and sat back down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Alicent said, oh, thank you for your proposal. The king and I will consider it. But you know, she's not considering it. She's thinking like, oh shit, I have to think of a good excuse now. Like, she's not going to say yes.
Yeah, Viserys seemed like he was down for it. He was all sitting at the head of the table like,
he was like, oh,
what do you think about that? Yeah. Sounds pretty good, huh?
Yeah. And even him, like, afterwards, he's like, Alicent, my queen, this is great, you know? And she's like, absolutely not, you know, over my dead body. And he was all like, oh. He was just all defeated, like, oh.
Yeah. But then I actually, back to the proposal, how Rhaenyra had said that her and Alicent used to be friends, I was like thinking, man, they're never going to be friends again. But I think it was like kind of an olive branch, like Rhaenyra giving Alicent opportunity to like, look, you know, there's a lot of tension going around, like, let's just try to make peace. And then I think this is like, if, you know, which we kind of, actually, I don't know, but if Alicent, say, does choose to accept this, right, like, things could go really well and the families are going to be all happily ever after. But we know that's not really, yeah.
And even if she accepts the proposal and even if they went through with it, it's still the claim of Jace and Rhaenyra over Aegon.
Mm-hmm.
Because Aegon is a true-born son. Rhaenyra is just a daughter. And unfortunately, the reality is this is a patriarchal society. There are going to be lords in there that would support Aegon over Rhaenyra no matter what, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next scene was... Well, we skipped over the scene of Lena talking with her daughter about the dragon egg. And I thought, oh, this kind of broke my heart. Because, like, the poor daughter is the only one in the family. Remember she had the egg over by the fireplace?
Mm-hmm.
And she's the only one in the family that doesn't have a dragon. Her mom, Daemon, has a dragon. Lena has a dragon. Her sister has a dragon. And she doesn't have a dragon.
When she said how father ignores her or whatever, I was like, oh, so he like favors the other one?
It seems that way, doesn't it? And he was like, he was teaching the other one how to read Valyrian, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the library in an earlier scene. And it's like, oh man, like, come on, Daemon, you could do better than that. Like, why don't you take her for a ride on the dragon or something? Like,
yeah,
you know?
Because maybe like if Daemon were to pass, she would get his dragon, right? So she could get like a couple, you know, tries.
That is a good point, Evalina. Yeah. That is a very good point. He could
Yeah.
have had her bond with the dragon before he's even gone. Yeah, or at least get her
Yeah.
used to dragon riding so she'll have
Mhm.
training later on. Maybe she can tame one from the dragon pit if that egg doesn't hatch. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Damon, you got to be thinking. You got to talk to Evalina about that.
I've got some tips for him.
um. Okay, so
What did you think of the scene, Ryan?
I mean, I was like, Evelina, I was like, come on, Damon, you got to be a better father than that. Like, especially
Mhm.
since he himself was in a good place, it seems, or a
Mhm.
better place than what he's been, the best place he's been all his life, it seems. Like, he was
Yeah.
calm, he wasn't trying to troll anybody. He seemed to
Mhm.
be like happy spending time in the library and having the Pentos lords like suck up to him. Like,
Yeah.
he like, okay, so you're in a good place now, dude. Like, you should, and you have time to spend with your family. Spend it with both your daughters, you know. um
Mhm.
and you can tell like he loves their mother too, so it's like, well, I don't see why there would be any resentment anywhere for like that daughter at all. So like,
Mhm.
unless she was a bad kid, but there's no indication of that, you know.
Yeah.
um Anyway, moving on. The next scene with this was an interesting scene where Alicent and Viserys go back to his room, and like she's like taking care of him, like putting the
Mm.
blanket on him and
Fluffing
fluffing
the
up his
pillow.
pillow behind him.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I've seen that so many times, like in real life, fluffing the pillow. Like my mom used to do that for Grandpa when he wasn't doing well. It's like, oh, I seen exactly that. So that was a little sweet, although she was a little bit like
Rough with it.
rough with him and like just kind of over it. Like I've done this 1,000 times, you know.
Yeah. And
Um,
she like dumped that blanket on him. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was a weighted blanket until she just plopped it on him.
yeah, and he's like, I don't need the blanket. She's like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then Lionel Strong comes in and he attempts to resign as Hand of the King.
Hmm.
Um, I, First of all, poor Lionel, like being Hand of the King, and he's trying to be an honorable Hand of the King. It has stressed him out so much. He's lost all his hair in 10 years. Like the poor guy. He had like a full head of hair in the last episode. Now it's like it's all gone. It's like, oh man. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, dude. He
His
lost all his hair
son.
before Viserys did.
Also, in that scene when Viserys is like, "You can't resign. Like you're the best hand of the king I've ever had. Blah blah blah. You've served me so well. Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Damn!" Right in front of Allison, whose dad used to be your hand.
I didn't
Like,
think about that. I didn't
I
think
was
about
like, "All
that.
right,
I
be
didn't think about that
careful."
I
either.
didn't say good point. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I wanted to say about this scene was about how like Allison wouldn't leave the king alone with him. I think that that kind of shows that like she's a little bit overbearing and like towards the end here, like will we get to see Viserys on his own? Like I think it definitely shows like Allison is really like trying to keep her hand in the game, you know, like
Mm.
yeah, like she could have just left so that the matter could be between the hand and the king, but it's like, you know, she has to be there for it. I guess she is the queen, but at the same time,
Well,
like just step outside.
I just watched it again before we got on here, and there's like a tiny, tiny little bit of a pause when Lionel is standing there. I think he's expecting her to leave the room
Hmm.
because, or at least the king to tell her to leave. Because
Yeah.
definitely when she was young version of her would have left the room. Like,
Hmm.
Right.
but like you can tell like she's changed, and she initiates the conversation by, what is it you wanted to talk about, uh, Lionel? And he was just like, oh, she, and then he's like, oh, I guess she's gonna stay. So then he started talking, you know.
Yeah.
So, um, she's definitely taking more of a lead in the running of the affairs of the kingdom, and she's definitely wearing the pants in the relationship of the marriage now, for sure.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think uh Well, why don't you guys talk first about the resignation thing? Because I want to say something, but I'm not sure I've completely developed my thought yet.
What did you think, Claudia?
Um, I get it. But also when he was saying like, "Oh, I need to send my son back so he can like start performing his duties as rightful heir of whatever the heck,
Harrenhal.
Harrenhal," I was like, "Why?" Like I mean I get why because like he can't be near Rainier anymore, but I was like for some reason some part of me was thinking that like he was hoping that eventually Rainier does become queen and then like her kids I don't know. I was thinking something about how he wanted to make his
So
son start doing his duty so he can also be like up there with her.
I understood it as that if his resignation was successful, if the king accepted it, that he could go back to Harrenhal, Lionel, with his son Harwin to get him. I think he was thinking of Harwin's safety because
Mm.
he was afraid that somebody was going to try to kill him.
Mm,
And he wasn't that far off.
And he wasn't that
yeah.
far off, although he probably was the person that did kill him was probably the last person he would suspect. But I think he was in the. Okay, I agree. I think that's what he was going for, and I want to say I agree with if that's true, that would be the right play. Would be to go back to his, like Harrenhal would be their power base, right? That would be where
Yeah.
their guards, their servants, where they're most loyal. It's like the Starks, right? They left Winterfell, and like half of them got killed, like because
Yeah.
Yeah.
they left their base of power. So like I think he was in the right in thinking of that. It's just nobody could foresee, like, how, geez, how damn evil the other son is.
I know.
Okay, it says your call ends in 10 minutes. Free group calls have a limit of 1 hour.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
That was as of June 2021 they
Oh,
did that.
really?
But I thought they started with 2 hours and
I mean,
then I guess now it's down to 1.
we could always just um, do another
Drop
call,
a new
right?
link.
Yeah, drop
Yeah.
a new link, and then I'll just edit the videos together. That's embarrassing, though. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that either. It's so embarrassing. We just
It's
have so much
okay.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I figured out what I wanted to say. So as Lionel, the Hand of the King, don't you think that he has the duty as Hand of the King to be like, yo, Viserys, our kids are, together? Like, don't you think that he's supposed to tell the king, like, my son's actually the father of your kids?
I
Because
think he was trying to. He was trying to in that conversation, and Allison was like, "Say it." Like she wanted him to say it, but
oh,
he was kind of
If
just
you
like,
admit to that, that's a crime, though. That's treason. You're basically
yeah,
sentencing your son to death.
right.
So you can't
I
admit to
see.
it. But he's just like, but that is also the reason he wants to resign. So he can't say it outright, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
And the king is kind of like, in total denial, right?
yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
just
like
oh
he's
yeah,
just choosing to remain in the dark.
yeah.
Yeah. Ugh, fucking Viserys. Sorry, is there any swearing on your channel? Um, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like, dude, you're the hand. You're supposed to say something. And then I felt because he accepted the deal of like, okay, they'll go back to Harrenhal or whatever. He'll escort his son back to Harrenhal. I was like, you still shouldn't be the hand of the king though, because now there's no way for him to be unbiased. Like there's no way that he can serve the realm and the king and all of that, knowing that like his own grandkids have a shot at the Iron Throne type of thing.
So you think Viserys should have punished him?
I think Viserys should have accepted his resignation. Been like, dude, you obviously can't say what it is that you need to resign for. I might as well just let you go. Because, yeah, well, I don't know. I think Viserys should have just let him go. But I think we're really witnessing the downfall of Viserys. Like, this guy is going to die real soon. I didn't even think he was going to make it through the wedding episode.
I thought he was dead 2 episodes ago. Yeah. And
Yeah.
he fainted. And then we saw him in the trailer and I was like, oh, he's still here?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and then like the wedding scene when he's like saying, you know, oh, our family's together, blah blah, for the 7 days of celebration, I was like, oh, he's not making it to the seventh day. but, but anyways, that was that. He's still alive. Here he is, missing a whole arm now.
Yeah, and also, like, if somebody asks you to resign and you say, like, not accepted, like, do you think their heart's really going to be into doing the job if they wanted to resign and you're like, no, you can't?
It's like, I don't want to be here, but you still want me to be here. Okay, fine. Like, yeah. I just don't think that anyways. I felt like he should have accepted the resignation. That was just a really poor decision on Viserys' part.
Okay. I'm going to stop the call and we'll make a new call.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, Ryan, you think you could email it to me?
Yeah, I can do that.
The link, because I'm on my computer.